Okay, welcome to the Neuro Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joseph Koppas, and I'm joined by my guest and my good friend, Dr. Michael Schmidt out of Columbia, Missouri. How's it going
Nice.
today, Dr. Schmidt?
It's going well, man. It's going really well. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah.
See what we can talk about.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on because you have not told me what we're talking about. So this is a surprise for me as well as the rest of the audience. So
Always like that.
Yeah.
It's always good.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get into it. So, Dr. Schmidt, you work out in Columbia, Missouri at Como Funk Neuro. Is that right?
Well, I decided to go back a little bit north of Columbia, and I changed it to Missouri Functional Neurology so that we could be a little more broad.
Yeah.
And in case I wanted to expand a little bit, I'm not restricted to the Columbia, Missouri area.
Makes sense. So how did you get into this field of functional neurology? We've had a few other functional neurologists on. Everybody seems to have a pretty unique story, but what's yours?
The way I got into it was first I got into chiropractic. I wanted to be able to help people before surgery and stuff like that. I shadowed a lot of orthopedic surgeons and stuff like that, and super interested in the human body and all that stuff like that. And then we got into chiropractic, and I'd never really been to too many chiropractors or really understood what it was doing, just all these crazy stories. So it was nice to start learning all that. And then I wanted to know more, like why is it helping this? Why is it helping this? Why is it like all these crazy stories and research that's coming out why is it helping? And then a bunch of people were talking about the brain, and I was like, oh yes, I like that. So I started diving into that, going to seminars, conferences while I was still in chiropractic school, and learning the whole brain aspect of things. And then it got into the fun stuff about applying things and seeing if we can make a change in the nervous system and stuff like that. And that's where the really fun stuff comes in when helping with patients.
Yeah. So what type of patients do you typically see, or do you like to work with that have I guess responded really well to this neurological care that you provide?
I'm in a small town right now, but I get people that come far and wide. So yes, I'll see like the regular POTS patients or some dizziness, vertigo, stuff like that. But I see quite a bit of musculoskeletal stuff too, that have like tried the natural, like the other physical therapy routes and stuff like that, and it's just not going the way they want it. Or they've had x-rays, MRIs, and everyone's deemed them as, hey man, you're good. We don't know what to do. Here's some pain meds, and hopefully things get better. So
Yeah.
I've seen a big variety. Majority, I'd say, is still musculoskeletal, but I'll get some ones in like POTS and others. But those are the unique ones that I really get to hammer down on a lot of the neuro stuff.
Awesome.
But I apply the neuro to everyone, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk a little bit about today.
Perfect segue.
Which will be exciting for us to see, and then other people to try out also, hopefully.
Absolutely. And to preface, I mean, you didn't mention this, but for those who don't know, you were a D1 wrestler at Mizzou, so you are probably no stranger to musculoskeletal injuries, as well as probably some neurological injuries as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You've seen my exam. You've done it. We've been working. We worked on some stuff with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was wrestled at University of Missouri and had some good times there. Lots of fun injuries, especially shoulder injury. But we were able to kind of figure that stuff out with help of some neuro friends and a little bit of rehab. And things are going great now. But yeah, it's always interesting with that kind of stuff too. So I can make a good connection with athletes, and so that makes it pretty easy. I coach wrestling here. Like I help out with the University of Missouri wrestling. Anything I can do to help with sports. I just love sports, so I think it's amazing.
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty good topic, and you're the perfect person to talk about it. So for those who may not be aware, like you don't typically think of the brain or neurology, or the lay people, when we're thinking of musculoskeletal injuries, right? Like, what does my torn hamstring have to do with, my brain, stuff like that. So can you kind of bridge the gap for people?
Yeah, so whenever we're looking at a majority of what I see when people come in, especially athletes, we'll see like different shoulder issues, like shoulder impingements, where all the muscles around the joint are super strong. I'll check all the rotator cuff muscles, everything is super strong, and so they just don't understand why if they move a certain way they have pain. So classically, they're diagnosed with impingement. They'll go through a classic protocol of shoulder rehab, and sometimes that's just not the deal. So what I do is I start applying. Obviously, I'll check all the muscles, do the muscle testing, reflexes, sensory dermatomes, and all that pinwheel and stuff like that. But what I also do is I do what I deem as neurological shoulder tests. Okay, so whenever I say that, I'm talking DDKs, the rapid alternating movements of the hands. I'm checking left side compared to right side. I'm checking vibration. Do they perceive vibration the same on both sides? I'm checking pursuits left to right side. I'm checking neck movements left to right side. The ability to move it nice and smoothly, just like that. I'm checking with their eyes in the vestibular first goggles, removing fixation. I want to see if they have a nystagmus that could be contributing. And then the most important thing is I apply something, I want to see a change. Okay. Whenever you're looking at classic shoulder impingement, over and over again, I see it'll be their dominant side that has the impingement. So everything's pretty tight on that side, but they have a lot of weakness on their other side. So say their left shoulder has a positive DDK, it has positive, a little bit of a tremor with extension with the finger to nose. It has, when he closes his eyes, they miss drastically with the left arm. So everything's pointing at left shoulder, left side stuff. So what I do is I start applying stuff to the left side. First thing I'll do is especially with athletes, because they're pretty strong already neurologically, so I'll hand them a body blade. Does everyone know what a body blade is? No? All right.
Yeah, we'll ask the audience.
Yeah, anybody know what the body blade is? So it's like a little wobbly stick thing. They grab it, and it's a rapid alternating movement that they shake. It's kind of like a shake weight, except higher tech, because college sports guys use it. And so they'll grab it and they'll just start shaking it. And with their left hand, they can't do it. Right hand's fine, so I'll just have them do it with the left hand. Have them do like 20 reps straight forward, 20 reps sideways, and then I go, all right, move your right shoulder again. And the majority of the time, their shoulder pain is gone. Mm-hmm. So it comes down to, and then I'll check the DDKs, I'll check the finger to nose again, and it changed it. Right? So I'm like, all right, that's awesome. So we need to start attacking the left shoulder, not necessarily the right shoulder. So neurologically, I'm like, okay, left shoulder's the problem, intuitively wise, and everybody else is like, okay, his pain's on the right side, we need to attack that right shoulder. We need to get the protocols out. We need to go after that right shoulder. Mm-hmm. But if you just add in a little bit of the neurological testing with the shoulder stuff, now all of a sudden you have a different game plan, and you could potentially have a better outcome.
Right. That's great. And you had mentioned earlier some other neurological tests that you're looking for, like eye movements without fixation, etc. What does that stuff tell you, or what do you get from that clinically when you're looking at the shoulder?
Especially with healthier, like people that are majority healthier. I try, after ruling out like structural damage with neurology and stuff like that, I look at like their ability to move in a specific direction. Right, so if I'm going to reach for something to my right, I'm going to kind of extend my right arm. I'm turning my head to the right, but I'm also looking to the right with my eyes. Okay, so that comes down to me as if I see a left shoulder problem, a majority of the time the person can't look left very well. They can't hold gaze left very well. They can't pursue left very well. They're inaccurate with their saccades to the left. So along with the leftward shoulder rehab, I'll throw in some leftward eye movement rehab too, with maybe add in a VOR to get that pursuit back, or just work with smaller saccades, micro saccades, and then get it to where the larger saccades are back intact and metric and stuff like that. So I look at it as more of a movement basis. Like if I'm reaching to the right, my right shoulder has to extend, but I also have to turn my head to the right, and I also my eyes need to be able to go to the right. So a lot of times you'll start seeing relationships with directional movement. I know a lot of people that deal with low back pain. All of us deal with low back pain. Those guys can't pursue down to save their life. Like, they just can't do it. So then once again, you apply something like a low back stretch or something like that, recheck it. If you made a positive change, yes, rock on, do more of that, you know? So like it could be clams. You did a clam exercise with them. You did a Mackenzie side glide on the wall, anything that's going to make a change. But the key that I've found is that you got to recheck the finding. If you're not rechecking the finding after you apply something, you could be going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, something that sets you apart, as well as a lot of other great doctors that we've talked to on the podcast, is that, you know, your objective findings, your exam is ongoing and it's ever changing, and it makes your treatments that much more dynamic and rich when you can, you know, take an intervention, apply it to a patient, make sure that you see some form of immediate change, and then go with it from there. Whereas I think that's not typically the common approach in healthcare.
Yes, and I wish it was a little more like that, but everything seems to be protocol based and stuff like that, which is tough, because that has to do with a lot with intuition, human intuition. That brings me to another point, is like the Moneyball effect. You know, everybody knows about the Moneyball effect. You've seen the movie, right?
I haven't seen the movie. Yeah, you'll have to let us know.
So Moneyball, the Moneyball effect is what they do is they try to remove human error or human intuition. So it started with like baseball. I forgot what team it was. It's been a while since I've seen that movie or anything like that too. But what they did was because they always have these scouts that go out and look at all these baseball players that are coming up, and these scouts are like the best, you know. But what they found is they had this statistician, or however you say that word. They had one of those smart fellers come in, and what he started doing is he was plugging the data for these guys. Like, how often does this guy get on base? How many hits does this guy get? And so what they did was he took all that data, and then he started picking players with that. So he took out human error, and he's strictly using data instead of human intuition, because a lot of times it comes down, whenever you're picking players for baseball, it's like, oh, I think this guy's pretty good because he has this little variable that I like, you know. So it's different for everybody. But if you're looking at the data, like, how often does this guy get on base? Like, that's data. Like, that's not you may not like that guy, but he gets on base a lot, so you're going to pick that guy. So that's why on that Moneyball movie, they had a team full of bunch of what they would deem as misfits, or a bunch of random dudes that they were like, there's no way you're going to start winning. And then that team started winning, and they ended up winning the World Series and stuff like that. So the Moneyball effect has been transformed into a lot of different aspects in business and stuff nowadays. Like Warren Buffett and what was that guy? Munger. They did the whole what's their business? Berkshire Hathaway, yeah. Yeah, so they did that, and they used that Moneyball effect. So what they did was they were like, we cannot go off of intuition. We cannot go off of gut feeling. We go off of data. That's what their sole purpose was. And year after year, they beat the market. And people deemed it impossible, and they deemed them being lucky, but they did it every single year, way better than everyone else. Okay, right. So whenever you look at the littlest variable and you try to control it to where you're not guessing or you're not using a gut feeling and stuff like that, I know it seems weird to take out human intuition because that's what we're all about, but to be honest with you, the last place that is not taking out human intuition is like the medical community and helping with patients. Okay. It's still very intuitively based, and and that's what we need to work towards getting rid of.
Yeah. So how do you ensure in your clinic that you have removed as much human intuition as you can and have just kind of strict data and data on these patients so that you can, remove any and all errors?
That's something I've been working on really, really hard, and I'll drift away occasionally to the whole human intuition side, and it almost always does me wrong, and then I'll go back to my exam and go, no, you fix the exam findings, and then I'll go back to that, and everything tends to take care of itself. But I learned a lot of it from like Carrick and Dr. Traster. What they do is they try to remove any kind of bias when the patient comes in, like say a POTS patient's coming in. Everyone's got their idea of what they find with every POTS patient. Well, guess what? They're all different. So you can't like put them in a basket. You have got to do the exam, try to remove any and all bias of like what you think is going to happen. Just be there, be present, overview the whole patient, and just let what happen, go through your exam. Whatever happens, write it down. That's your findings. So now you have your findings, okay? Second part, what I try to do in my clinic is I try to change the findings with a simple sensory input, whether it's a head tilt, whether it's a back stretch, whether it's something like that. I try to change it. If I'm able to change that with a simple sensory input, I will do that until they can look neutral and be resting, and it's good. So I try to do something, recheck the exam finding. So for me, I'm looking at the very small variables. I'm like, okay, one exam finding at a time, fix that one exam finding, move to the next one, right? As we've all seen, you can fix a lot of the exam findings with a head tilt. Most of them will be fixed with a head tilt. So you do the roll, do the vestibular roll, the trastor roll.
So let's take like a few steps back. So
yeah,
you gotta break this stuff down for people.
Okay, yeah. So whenever you look at, so after an exam, during the exam, say majority of the time, someone will be hearing the Rhine with the Weber and Rhine test. They'll hear it louder in one ear or quieter in one ear versus the other. You can do a simple head tilt, head position, like left anterior canal, right anterior canal, right posterior canal, left posterior canal, right roll, left roll, and you can change those. You can change those to where they're equal. So for me, I'm like, all right, we need to apply this roll. So we do a off-label Epley's maneuver, where you start opposite and you just let the muscles stretch. But what I've found also is that if I'm in a left anterior canal, I'm stretching that right upper trap. So I'll just stretch the right upper trap sometimes, and then I'll be able to change those findings also. So that's the whole thing about stretching, or just tilting the head. You're stretching a muscle, and you're activating certain muscles when you tilt somebody's head to gravity. So what I do is I do that repetitively, just a few reps of that stretch, and then I go back to neutral and I go, okay, what is normal now? So I recheck whatever was abnormal, DDKs, Rhines, pursuits, anything that was abnormal, and I go, sweet, now we're down to just a couple. So then whenever we're down to a couple, I see what's going to change those, but you got to have an idea in mind of what you're going to try, and that's where the human intuition can come in. If you haven't been around and seen all these different docs do things and help people, like, you're not going to have a good idea what to try to change these findings. So that's where the whole clinical aspect comes in, is you have got to be working with these docs who have had success. You got to see what they're doing and really write it down and try to understand it to a very deep level. Otherwise, you're not going to understand it, and you're not going to be comfortable with applying it to a patient.
Yeah, and I think that's something that set you apart, really, is you've put in the time to learn from a lot of great people, which has made you, in turn, a great clinician, great doctor, and you know how to find the objective data, and you also do have that human intuition, which I think for you plays pretty well together. But I just want to take another step back to the whole head and gravity thing. So what you're doing is you're really playing with the head, and you're altering the way that the brain perceives gravity, right?
There's so much involved there that it's like I try to put it down to one thing, but you can't, So if I go down like this, yes, I'm having vestibular input. Right. Gravity's changing the otolithic input. I'm also stretching my neck right here. I'm contracting the neck on this side. So it's like there's so many different variables involved that I try not to say this is what I'm doing. I just go, I did this, and that changed this. That's significant to me. That needs to be wrote down. So it's like there's so many different variables that are involved with that it's tough to say you're doing one thing or the other. It's just, if you do that a couple more times and they go back to neutral, is everything better? So it's like some people get stuck with trying to say, well, this is exactly what I'm doing when I do this. But the reality of whenever you're looking at somebody's brain is like there's so many things involved when you just tilt the head. Just like whenever I reach for this water over here. There's so many things involved when I reach for the water. My right arm's extending. My left might flex a little bit. My trunk's got to turn to the right. The back of my neck on the left and back of my back on the left, they have to brace for me. My right foot will lean that way. So the vestibular system's going that way. So it's like there's all different kinds of variables that are involved. And if you try to localize it down to one thing, you're kind of missing the boat. Just apply things and see a change. If you see a positive change, you're winning. That's a win.
Yeah.
That's what.
And I think you're bringing up really good points, because we have all these tests in this field and other fields that this test means this, positive test means this, but like you're right. There's a lot of things that go into this. We could have like what we call a positive Dysdietokinesia on the left when we're looking at the shoulder, but maybe somebody's got like maybe not. Typically, we think that's a cerebellar finding, right?
Yeah, everyone would say
that's
got
a rotator cuff tear or something, and now they can't move their arm appropriately.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
That's a classic left cerebellar sign. But guess what? You can't take the left cerebellum and you can't separate it from the right frontal, right parietal. You can't do it. They are a loop. Yes, if you disrupt one little part, you're going to have a problem. But in reality, they work together.
Right.
So if you apply anything to that left shoulder, left arm, it's going to go through that loop, and you're most likely going to make a positive change in that DDK.
Right.
So you can't separate it out. Everyone has these classic things, but like it's a loop. It's a circle. There's no corners. It's a full thing. So you can't separate it out. Everyone wants to like localize the lesions. Yeah, if there's an infarct or something like that, that's different than what we're doing with this clinical neuroscience, functional neurology stuff. But you can still make an impact on those circuits like that.
So I just want to bring it back to the major topic as a whole, and that is musculoskeletal injuries, right?
Yes.
As they relate to brain issues or physiological issues. So what are some other ways or other, I guess, neurological findings that you tend to see, or areas of the brain that tend to not be as strong as others when you're looking at musculoskeletal injuries or different pathways?
Absolutely. So we kind of hit the shoulders a little bit. When I say shoulders, you want to make sure you test both shoulders, so left shoulder, right shoulder, because if you're reaching with the left shoulder, you have to brace with the right. The right's going to contract a little bit the opposite direction just for your bracing. And the same with the other one. So you want to check both shoulders out. Don't just check the problematic one. And that's what I found over and over again is when I first started out, I was like, it's musculoskeletal. I'll do this. I know what to do with here. I'll adjust them on that side. I'll stretch them on that side, do some rotator cuff strengthening exercises. And then I found that I wasn't getting as fast as a result that I wanted. So I was like, all right, go back to neurology. What are some neurological shoulder tests? Let's do some finger to nose. Let's do some DDK. So I'm adding in those things, and I always found that a lot of times it's on the other side. So if they're strong right-hand dominant, the findings will be on the left. I'm like, well, let's do some stuff with the left side. So we'll start strengthening that side, fix that DDK or finger to nose on that side, and all of a sudden the right one kind of loosens and without pain, and that's pretty cool. But that's why you got to do the exam. Sometimes it's the same side where you find the findings, So you can't just guess or use, or like you throw a protocol at it. You gotta do the exam and see which shoulder findings are there. I call them shoulder findings. I know there's certain areas of the brain findings. I'll use finger tapping too. It's a classic frontal. So you can use all of those and see which one's not good, and then apply things to see if you can find a change. And then like what shoulder, what side of the brain to apply things to. Another thing I see a lot is like hip pains, low back issues. So with those guys, I'll do the classic like tandem stance, I have one foot in front of the other. I'll have them try to walk tandem with their eyes up. A lot of times they'll fall to their weak side. That's a classic that side cerebellum or the other side cortex. Well, guess what? It's a loop. Once again, you can't separate it out. So now once again, you're looking at that side. If they fall the other way, but their pain's on the other side, what are you going to go after? Are you going to go after the neurology? Or are you going to go after the musculoskeletal, their complaint? And once again, I do the muscle testing. I see what muscles are tight. I see which muscles are loose. Check for different rigidities and stuff like that, reflexes. And then, so after the tandem, with tandem, I'm looking at more like left to right kind of motion. I want to see if they're falling one way or the other. Then I'll do a single leg stance. For me, there's a couple research articles I found that say that you should be able to stand on one leg for at least 20 seconds with your eyes open, looking straight ahead. So that's my goal for everybody. And a lot of times you'll see that one side, they can only stand for like 3 seconds. So then once again, you're going, okay, let's get that left hip stronger. Let's practice standing on one leg on the left side and improve that. And whenever you improve those findings, the symptoms get better.
Right. So that's perfect. So, and you may be doing interventions, like you said, if my hip is the problem or my back is the problem, you may be doing interventions that are nowhere near my hip and my back, and patients may be thinking, I'm sure a lot of your patients are thinking, what's this guy doing? I came here for my back and he's like twirling my arm around and checking my eyes. Like,
I've had a few low back pain athletes that come in, and they're like, I've done all the hip rehab in the world. And I'm like, okay, well, let me check them neurologically, make sure you actually have a good representation in your brain of your hips. So I'll do the single leg balance, eyes open, eyes closed. And a couple of times, those hip findings were actually really good. Tandem was pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. And then I go to do a head impulse test to see how their vestibular function is, and they have a positive head impulse test bilaterally. So I'm like, okay, your vestibular system's a problem, but your low back is the pain. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay. So I'll do like OPKs with head turns, or I'll do VOR ×2 viewing to improve the function of that. Obviously, I'll do a few reps and I'll recheck, see if it improved it. And I'll go, that's awesome. Let's do some more of that. So we'll do like 3 rounds of it. And then I'll stop and go, all right, bend over and touch your toes. Tell me how your back feels. And all of a sudden they're like, how did you do, what is this, you know? So once again, it does come down to doing the exam. If you do the exam and you find the abnormal findings, most of the time you fix them, find something that's going to fix them, you're going to have a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I wanted to touch on a little earlier with the head positions and changing the way we perceive gravity, and that the vestibular system plays a big role in our muscle tone and how we move through space, right? So how can something simple as tilting the head, if it is a vestibular problem, could be like you were saying, could be other things. But if you do narrow it down, it's more of a vestibular problem, which is something that a lot of us check for oftentimes. How does that change muscle tone and physiology?
When you look at the vestibular system, it's the oldest system ever. So you look at the oldest animals, like jellyfish, they have a vestibular system, so like it's the most primitive reflex ever. Whenever we're born, we have a fully functioning one. Like, it's pretty important. What I like to do with my patients, especially, I know it's like oversimplifying it, but I want them to understand it as well as I do, is I go, okay, your vestibular system, think of it like this. Your vestibular system is telling your brain where your head is in space. If you don't have a good idea where your head is in space, do you think everything else below that's going to be loose or tight? It's going to tighten down because you need to know where your head is in space. It's where your brain is. That's where the important stuff is. So if you don't have a good idea, representation of where your head is in space, and then I tilt your head in a specific direction and it gets better, like, no, I'm not going to make you walk around like this. Some of them ask all the time, hey, do I got to walk around like this to make it better? I'm like, no, just do the stretch a little bit and we'll make it better, right? So just tilting your head, you're activating that vestibular system, but in reality, you're giving your brain a better representation of where your head is in space. And whenever that has a better idea where it is in space, things below that loosen up really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may seem a little non-intuitive to a lot of people, but the vestibular system is king with a lot of these things. So
they wouldn't have such a thick textbook on it that took me 3 times to read to understand if it wasn't an important thing. It's kind of like the neurology of eye movements. The book's thick, and they go into some serious detail, so it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've touched on a lot of things today, and I think if people before listening to this had really no idea how the brain really had to do with muscle tone and musculoskeletal injuries. I think they'll have a pretty good idea now. We've hit on a lot of big systems, and you've given a lot of great examples of the things that you're doing in order to fix these patients from a neurological standpoint, which I think has been amazing. But we're just about out of time, and I wanted to make sure that I give you a little bit extra time to leave us with any words of wisdom or anything that we didn't touch on.
Just like a little food for thought for all of us that are trying to do research and write up case studies and like get what we do better known. I know we like write up case studies on specific patients, but I think we should start moving to writing up different studies on what we're doing to fix certain findings. Because that breaks it down to a whole nother level. Like, what am I doing to fix the left DDK?
Yeah.
What am I doing to that? So if you can all of a sudden like put a bunch of research together that's fixing that, I feel like we'll have a better opportunity to move forward than if we're just publishing a case study where we're applying 10,000 different therapies and we're getting a good result, but like, what did you do to each one that fixed each one, you know?
Yeah.
So like what did you do to fix that leftward pursuit? Everyone knows that if I turn my head to the right, like my eyes go left, so you can use a VOR to help fix that. You could. I mean, I've used microsaccades that way to fix it too. I've used microsaccades the other way to fix it. So what are you doing to fix that leftward pursuit? What did you apply that made that normal? I feel like we need to start writing stuff up on that than anything else. Somebody can't stand on a single leg for 2 seconds. What did you apply to them that fixed that?
Yeah.
So like now we're looking at more fixing the neurological findings to get the stats on what people could apply to those neurological findings to fix those, instead of going, okay, they have a left DDK, let's here's the protocol, do this. So that's my thought, and that's my leave it at that. You know, I really want this profession to go really far, and like the patients that come in, everyone knows whenever you have patients come in, they love what we do. They want to understand it more. They're like, how do people not know about this? Well, this is why, because everyone's doing so many different things to fix something, you know? So if we can be like, all right, I applied this, it fixed this, that is like this and this. There's the data, this is what fixed it, and you do it over and over and over again, that's significant. And that's where I think we'll make a good change. Just breaking it down to another variable. What changed the neurological finding? What changed that? That moment in that time, what did you apply and what changed it?
Yeah, I agree completely. And as a fellow clinician, I think that if we were to focus our research more towards the more specific findings, like you were saying, that's just going to make everyone as a whole in this field much more efficient and effective at taking care of patients. So I agree 100%.
That's the thought. That's the thought. I want everybody to be better. I want to be better. So it's like I want it to work out that way. I want to be able to help patients more. Everyone should want that, or they're in the wrong profession. Yep.
That's why I love talking to you, and I respect you, Dr. Schmidt. Always striving to be better. It's awesome. It's contagious.
Absolutely.
So, if people wanted to find out more about you and your clinic, how would they get in touch with you?
If they want to email me, Missouri or MOFUNCNEURO@gmail.com. I answer that all the time. Questions, talk to colleagues all the time. We're always chatting about better ways to help people, or if we have questions, we're always figuring that out. I have a business Facebook page, Missouri Functional Neurology and Chiropractic. I'm always posting interesting research articles. I try to quote out the important stuff so it's not so burdensome to read. That's about it. You can follow me on that stuff, or just give me a shout. You'll find all my information on that page, and I'm always wanting to help people and learn. So if you have good ideas or you want to chat more about what I was just discussing, like, throw it my way. I'm always down to learn more and improve my skills as a clinician.
Very cool. And again, what town are you located in?
I am actually north of Columbia, about 20 miles. It's in Centralia, Missouri.
That's right.
So, Yeah, that's where I'm at. I figured it would be a problem, but it's not. People that need help, they'll find you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you help them, they'll tell people about it. So it's not a problem if you're doing your best.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Schmidt. This was great. Always a pleasure talking to you. But this has been your host, Dr. Koppas.